Do you know that feeling of warmth that rises by the spine when you are about to do something wrong, but very, very tempting? Today I know well, but a few weeks ago, the only thing I felt was the boredom of a Tuesday afternoon and my sister's call. The proposal was simple, almost silly. "Aunt, take Lucas to see her grandmother? It's a long trip, and you drive so well." Lucas, my nephew, 21 years, that heir of whom he knows of everything, and, I admit, a smile that always disarmed. The whole family, including me. It seemed harmless. A car trip, catching up, winning some dots with the family. Why not? Little did I know that that decision, made between a sip of coffee and another, was not about taking my nephew to visit his grandmother. It was about taking us to a place where we could never go back. That, yes, was the first step on a road without return. A road that started with a perfect asphalt and ended in a cheap motel room, with the tension between us both dense that you could cut with a knife. A tension that promised to explode at any moment. And exploded. Are you curious to know where this will stop? So subscribe to the channel because you won't want to lose the rest. The first hours of the trip were exactly what I expected. The car, a gift I had given me, still had that again smell that mixed pleasantly with his woody perfume. Lucas controlled the music, an eclectic playlist that went from indie rock to 90s classics, and we were singing together, challenged and carefree. The landscape passed the window like an afternoon session movie, with green fields and a cloudless blue sky. He told me about college, the design projects that left him awake until late, and a girl he was leaving, but it didn't seem to be anything serious. I talked about work, the gossip of the office, and how I was looking forward to a real vacation. It was a light, familiar conversation, the type of dialogue that fills the weather and strengthens ties in a safe and predictable way. We stopped at a gas station on the road to buy snacks and sodas, laughing at what was the worst combination of flavors we could create. At that moment, he was just Lucas, my sister's son, the boy I saw growing up, and I was just the legal aunt, the confidant for matters he wouldn't tell her mother. Harmony was so perfect, the normality so palpable that it was misleading. It was the calm that fate uses to catch you off guard, the peace that serves only to make the following chaos seem even noisier and more devastating. Each laugh, every song, was one more step towards the cliff, and we followed, completely alien. The sun was beginning to go down the horizon, painting the sky with orange and purple tones when we saw the first barrier, an endless line of stopped cars and brake lights flashing to where the view reached. I turned on the local radio, and the news came as a bucket of cold water. A serious accident involving 2 trucks had closed the main highway in both directions. The forecast was at least 5 hours of stoppage. The plan to arrive for dinner at Grandma's house was under the drain. The frustration took over the car for a moment. Lucas, practical as always, opened the map application on his cell phone. "Relax, Aunt. I found a shortcut here. Take the next exit. We'll cut it for some secondary roads, but GPS says it saves about 3 hours. The idea seemed genius. A shortcut, a small adventure to break the highway's monotony. Who has never taken a deviation to escape traffic? It was a logical, almost automatic decision. I trusted the technology and trust of it. I turned the steering wheel at the indicated exit, leaving behind the safety of the main road. Today, I think at that moment, the car flasher in front of me, the shine of the cell phone in his hand, my complete lack of hesitation, it was there. In that curve, that we left the map of our life as we knew it. We entered a script that was not ours, in a path that had not been set for an aunt and his nephew. The secondary road started well. It was paved, narrow, but well-maintained. For about 20 minutes, the decision seemed right. The scenario changed to old farms and small villages that looked like stops in time. The sun had already hidden completely, and the darkness began to swallow the landscape, making everything a little more mysterious, but still managed. So the asphalt is over. Suddenly, without warning, we were on a dirt road, full of holes, which made the car shake integer. Signaling plates disappeared. The houses and farms gave way to a dark, dark vegetation that seemed to close on us. Every kilometer, the feeling of adventure became increasing anxiety. "Are you sure it's here, Lucas?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm not to alarm him, or perhaps not to alarm me. He was looking at his cell phone, his forehead frown. The GPS is sending to follow. In a moment, we should go back to the asphalt, rest assured. But the tranquility had already jumped out of the car a few kilometers ago. The only sound was the engine and tires crushing the gravel. Outside, the darkness was total, absolute. There were no posts, there were no lights from other houses, there were no other cars. We were alone, completely alone in a place that should not exist on any map. And the only thing that guided us was a blue line on a screen that was beginning to seem more and more fanciful. The final blow came with the message on his cell phone. Screen, lost GPS signal. The blue line that was our only hope disappeared, leaving only a point flashing in the middle of nowhere. At the same time, I noticed that my own cell phone had been without service for a long time. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer a silence of peace, but a heavy silence, loaded with contained panic. And now, my voice came out lower than I intended. Lucas tried to restart the device, shaking his cell phone, hoping to capture some lost signal. Nothing. We were officially lost. In the dark, on a road that went nowhere, without communication with the outside world. The responsibility for him, for the boy his mother trusted me, weighed on my shoulders like a ton. I kept driving slowly, my eyes fixed on dust illuminated by the headlights, because stopping seemed even more scary. Fear began to manifest itself physically. My hands were sweating on the wheel, my heart was hit by my ribs. I looked at him and saw my own fear reflected on his face, although he tried to disguise with a forced calm. It was at this moment that the dynamics between us began to change. I was no longer just the aunt in control. We were two adults together in a situation of real danger. The family hierarchy dissolved in darkness and shared vulnerability. We were on our own, and the only person I could trust, and who could trust me, was sitting next to me. After what seemed like an eternity driving random, a weak light blinked in a distance. At first, I thought it was a mirage, a trick of my tired mind. But she continued there, lonely and constant. He was a neon sign, with some letters failing, but still readable. Motel Lone Recanto. Beside, a second, more modest sign said, vacancies. Never. In my life, the vision of a roadside motel seemed so heavenly. It was civilization, or the closest to that we would find that night. It was a ceiling, a bed, a lock on the door. It was the promise of security, no matter how precarious it was. I turned the car toward the gravel entrance without thinking twice. The decision was mutual, silent. There was no other option. The place seemed to be out of a horror movie B. The painting was peeled, there was only another car in the parking lot, and the reception light was weak and yellowish. A thin cat watched us from a wall. The air was heavy, with the smell of mold and loneliness. But none of this mattered. The tiredness and relief were so big that I would sleep even on the floor of that place. We got out of the car, and the sound of our steps in the gravel seemed to echo at night. I felt his eyes on me, a mixture of relief and hesitation. We were about to cross a new threshold, leave the car's relative security to enter that unknown place. That motel was not just a shelter, it was the stage where the rest of our history would unfold. The reception was even more depressed inside. The man behind the counter, old, with an bored look, barely lifted the eyes of his newspaper. "No?" he asked with a dragged voice. "We need a room. Actually, two," I said quickly, trying to establish the normality of our situation. Aunt and nephew. Separate rooms. Simple. He released a short, humor laugh. "My lady, at this time of night? Are you lucky for me to have something?" He turned and took a single key hanging on a wooden board. "I only have a room left, with double bed. The plumbing of the other block burst early today." The phrase was hanging in the air, dense and uncomfortable. I looked at Lucas. He was visibly embarrassed, looking at any point in the room other than my face. Silence stretched for a few seconds. The alternative was to go back to the car, to darkness, to uncertainty. No, it was not an option. I took a deep breath, feeling the flushing climb through my neck. Okay, we stayed with him. I paid for cash, avoiding the receptionist's gaze, which now seemed to have a malicious glow in the eyes. He gave us the key, and the weight of that small metal object in my hand was absurd. It was the key to a room, but it also looked like the key to a door that once open, would lead us to a completely new and dangerous place. The joke of destination had been told, and we were the target. The room was exactly as expected, clean, but old. The carpet had faded spots, the wall air conditioner made a constant tinnitus, and the double bedquilt had a dubious floral pattern. There was a single wooden chair in the corner and a small bathroom with yellowish tiles. The door closed behind us with a loud click, sealing us inside and leaving the rest of the world outside. A deafening silence took over the environment. None of us knew what to say or do. I put my bag in the chair, the only neutral space in the room. Lucas dropped his backpack near the door. We moved with exaggerated care, as if the ground were made of eggs, hyper-conscious of each movement, each breathing of the other. I could hear the sound of my own breath, feel the blood throbbing in my ears. The double bed was there, in the center of everything, huge, impossible to ignore. It was the white elephant in the middle of the room, the epicenter of all our strangeness. Who would sleep where? One of us on the floor? The idea was ridiculous. We were exhausted. "I can sleep in the chair," he finally said, breaking the tension with a hoarse voice. "Don't even think, Lucas. You're much louder than this chair. We find a way. We're family, right?" The word family sounded strange in my mouth, almost like a lie. At that moment, in the weak light of that lamp, familiarity seemed to have evaporated, leaving only one man and a woman alone in a room. To break the unbearable tension, I suggested that we turn on the TV. We found an old movie passing, one of those suspensions in black and white. The sound of television filled the silence, giving us something to focus beyond our own situation. I sat on the edge of the bed, back to him as he sat in his chair. The physical distance was intentional, but emotional proximity was about to change. "You." "No, Aunt, that girl I told you." He started with a low voice. "I think I finished with her today, in my head." The confession took me by surprise. I turned a little to look at him. "Why?" "I thought you liked her." He shrugged, looking at his own hands. "I liked it. But she wanted things I don't know if I can give. A future, plans. I feel a boy yet." That phrase opened a door. Seeing your vulnerability, I felt the need to share something mine too. "I understand you. Sometimes I look at my life, my apartment, my work right, and I feel like I was acting, as if the responsible adult were a character I seen every day. But inside, I don't feel so different from the girl I was in 20s. The conversation flowed from there. We talk about fears, about the pressures we felt, about family expectations and our own frustrations. We stop being aunt and nephew for a moment and become just two people confessing their insecurities in the weak light of a motel room. With each word changed, the barrier between us diminished, and intimacy grew in a new and unexpected way. The conversation light on fears, and dreams soon plunged into deeper waters. The confidence generated by the isolation situation has made us bolder. Lucas told me about the pressure he felt from his father to pursue a career he didn't want, a secret he kept for fear of disappointing everyone. He talked about how he felt, a fraud near college friends. Listening to anguish in his voice, I felt an empathy that went beyond Aunt's affection. I saw myself in it. And then, I did something I had never done before. I told him about my broken engagement years ago, a subject that was taboo in the family. I revealed details that even my sister, his mother, knew. I talked about betrayal, humiliation, and how it broke my confidence in others for a long time. He got up from his chair and sat at the opposite end of the bed facing me. Now there were no more physical barriers, just the space between us. He listened to me with an intensity that I had never seen in anyone. His eyes did not deviate from mine. At that moment, he was not a boy. He was a man, hearing a woman's pain. "Sorry, Aunt. No one ever told me that," he said, and his voice was pure sincerity. "It's because no one knows everything," I said. In that room, that night, the family secrets were exposed. We created a confidential pact with the look only. We were complicit now, guardians of truths that connected us in a powerful and dangerous way. With the secrets exposed, the air in the room has changed. The emotional intimacy we build began to overflow to physical space. I could feel the warmth emanating from it, even at a short distance. The tinnitus of the air conditioner seemed to have disappeared, and I was aware of every small change in its expression, each movement. He reached out and touched my arm, a consolation gesture for what I had told. But the touch was not just a comforting. It lasted a second more than necessary. Your skin on mine sent an electric shock all over my body. I didn't go back. Instead, I looked into his hand on my arm, and then to his eyes. What I saw there scared me and attracted me to the same extent. Curiosity and something else. "You're very strong," he said, and his voice was a whisper. "You don't look strong," I said, almost no breath. "You look intense." The word was among us, loaded with meanings. The line between family care and another kind of interest was becoming blurry, almost invisible. Every second of silence was an invitation to cross it. The tiredness of the trip, the fear, the adrenaline, the confessions, everything has mixed in a powerful and toxic cocktail. The situation undressed us from our social roles. We were not aunt and nephew. We were a man and a woman, arrested by the circumstance, connected by secrets, and now suspended at the exact moment when protection becomes provocation. The mood was armed. Tension was no longer embarrassed but anticipation. And then he smiled. A small smile. Corner of his mouth. A smile I had never seen before. It was a challenge smile. "You know, Aunt, you always looked so right. The person who always does the right thing." The provocation was thrown, light as a pity, but heavy as lead. I entered the game. Appearances deceive, nephew. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. My heart hammered. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. But adrenaline was addictive. I wanted to see how far he would go. How far would I go? The prohibition of the act was what made him so magnetically attractive. He approached a little more in bed. "It's really? So prove me. Tell me something nobody knows. Something right aunt would never do." The challenge was clear. It was a test, a climb, each of us pushing the limit a little further away. The atmosphere was electric. "I doubt you have the courage to hear," I said, a firmer voice than I felt inside. His gaze intensified. "I doubt you have the courage to tell." The word game, "I doubt," turned the room into an arena. There was no return. We were in a duel of provocations that could only end in one way, with one of us giving in completely, or both. His challenge was in the air. I didn't respond with words. Instead, I sustained his gaze and slowly took the jacket that I still dressed, bending it and placing it by the bed. It was a simple gesture, but the meaning was clear. I was accepting the game and climbing the bet. The air in the room seemed to get warmer, thicker. He observed every movement of mine. His eyes followed my hands as I straightened the shirt underneath. Silence came back. But now it was a silence full of possibilities. I could feel his eyes burning my skin. He understood that the words were no longer necessary. Communication was now purely physical, made of gestures and looks. He imitated my act. Slowly, he took his own jacket. The sound of the zipper opening was the only noise in the room. He threw her in the chair without turning his eyes off mine. We were in an impasse. A silent duel of those who would dare to take the next step. The clothes we dressed, which were once normal, now seemed heavy, restrictive, a final barrier between what we were and what we could be. Motel's room, which was once a prison, was now our particular universe, a sanctuary for the forbidden. There was no family, there were no rules, there was no world out there. There was only both of us, the growing heat and the silent question that hovered in the air. Who would be the first to break and transform the provocation into reality? The answer was just a touch of distance. It was he who moved first. He covered the remaining distance between us in bed. His movement was deliberated and without hesitation. He stopped inches from my face, and I didn't go back. I could feel his breath on my skin, hot and fast. The whole world shrunk to that minimum space between our lips. "Aunt." He whispered my name and did not sound like my name. He sounded like a question and permission. I didn't answer. Instead, I raised my hand and touched his face, my skin against his. It was the point of ignition. At that moment, the last barrier of health, rules, family, evaporate. What happened next was a feverish mixture of curiosity, desire, and dizzying attraction for the forbidden. It was confusing, urgent, and undeniable. In that motel room, with thin walls and a broken neon sign outside, we cross a border of which there is no return. There were no witnesses. There was no one to judge us or stop us. We were in our own isolated world, where the normal rules of life did not apply. And we completely surrender to this temporary reality. Each touch, every kiss, was a brick more building a wall between our past and our future. It was the demolition of one relationship for the construction of another, one that had no name, no place in society. We knew it was wrong. We knew it was indefensible. And at that moment, none of us cared. The taboo was the greatest of aphrodisiacs. The sunlight invaded the room through a bastard in the cheap curtain, a bright line of dancing dust that looked like a spot of accusation. I opened my eyes and reality hit me with the strength of a punch in the stomach. The smell of sex and sweat was in the air, mixed with the mold smell of the room. Beside me, Lucas slept, his quiet young face in a brutal contrast with the enormity of what we had done. The cold panic went up my throat. What did I do? I looked at him, no longer as a partner in the transgression of the night before, but as my nephew, my sister's son, the boy I held on my lap. The fault was a physical monster, squeezing my chest, leaving me without air. The magic of the night, the excuse of the circumstance, all faded under the merciless light of the morning. I got up in silence, picking my clothes off the floor with an overwhelming feeling of shame. Each piece of clothing looked dirty, contaminated. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the cracked mirror. I did not recognize the woman who stared at me. There were dark circles under my eyes, and an expression of horror that I couldn't disguise. The cool aunt had died in that room. Outside, the sounds of the real world were beginning to return. A truck passing the road, birds singing. The world continued, indifferent to our sordid secret. But for me, everything had changed. Reality was no longer the same. The sunlight did not bring heat, just illuminated the ruin we had created. When I left the bathroom, he was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, his head between his hands. He didn't look at me. The silence in the room was even heavier than the night before. It was no longer a silence of embarrassment, but of repentance and shame. The intimacy of the night had been replaced by an abyss of strangeness. "We need to go," I said, and my voice sounded cold, distant. He just nodded, without raising his head. We dress and arrange our things in a mechanical silence, avoiding each other's eyes at all costs. Each was lost in his own guilt island. The complicity of the night before had become a conspiracy of silence. At the reception, the same man of the night before looked at us with a smile that he knew everything, which only worsened my discomfort. We returned the key and went to the morning air, which looked too fresh, too clean for people like us. We stopped for a coffee at a diner on the road. We sat at separate tables. The coffee was bitter, but I drank anyway, like a penance. We do not exchange more than 10 words. "Do you want sugar?" "No." "Ready to go?" "Yes." The words were short, functional, devoid of any emotion. They were just tools to get us out of that situation as soon as possible. The weight of what was not being said was overwhelming. The secret was among us, visible and palpable. The return trip was the opposite of the trip. There was no music. There was no laughs. There was no small talk. There was only the sound of the engine and the noise of the road. The landscape passed the window, but I saw nothing. We were less than 1 meter away from each other, but an ocean of guilt and secrecy separated us. We were two strangers sharing the same car. When I left him at the door of his grandmother's house, the farewell was quick and clumsy. "Bye, Aunt." "Bye, Lucas." There was no hug. There was not even a direct look. He took the backpack and got out of the car, and I accelerated. Looking at the rearview mirror, it becomes smaller and smaller until it disappears. A part of me never wanted to see him again. Another part knew we were linked forever. Driving alone, the enormity of what happened consumed me. Our family relationship was set on fire in that motel room. From the ashes, this secret was born, this forbidden memory that we now carry. There is no way to erase. There is no way to be the cool aunt and the dear nephew. Those people died on that dirt road. Now, every time we meet in family meetings, there is a secret in our eyes, a silent recognition that no one else understands. We live with this time bomb, knowing that our relationship has changed forever, and the question that remains, which haunts me every night, is how to live with a secret that is stored not in a diary, but in the trunk of your own soul.